ZBrush hair tutorial. To start hair, I normally start with a sphere and I dynamesh it at 32. As you can see, I'm just roughing it out a bit, just creating the general shape. When you're starting hair, you want to keep it as simple as possible, and this is just the rough pass. I'm just making it the overall shape of what I have on the references on the monitor next to me. Taurus has an undercut, so I really just need to focus on the hair on top because the rest I'm probably just going to paint underneath. He's a little bit of a challenge compared to the other characters that I have because his hair is a bit wavy. So I have to make sure that the tips have a wave or a curl to them. And as you saw there, I just pulled them out. You just mask and pull things out. You don't have to worry about anything else. This isn't about details. I dynameshed again just to clean things up. The more you model, the more you actually kind of polish as you go, and I like to do that with hair. I like to polish as I go. Just putting in some more of his little wavy tips there. Because his hair is pretty simple, the silhouette, of course, is very important, and I want to make sure that those tips that pop out really show up in his silhouette. So it's also important to mention here that with hair, you don't want to get too symmetrical. I'm definitely doing it on the sides because that'll save me time in texturing and retopology later. But you're going to see at some point I'm going to break symmetry in the design just to make it look a little bit more interesting. Here I'm just doing the back. I can't stress enough how important masking is in this phase. I use the same brushes that I mentioned before for our polish pass, but I do bring in the clay buildup for hair. Clay buildup is a huge asset because it adds some real texture and height to the hair at different levels, so it makes it look like the hair is not as simple as it is. Just fusing those parts together, and it's kind of ridiculous. So close, but so symmetrical. Just detailing the back with Dam Standard. Dam Standard is a huge asset for hair. If the Dam Standard is too destructive and you see it too pixelated, just either soften out its Z intensity or add the subdivisions to at least a 64. Like the face and the rest of the character, the rest of the body, I like to keep my dynameshes pretty low unless I'm going to add textures to it. I don't like to make it any higher than 128. Textures maybe at 256, but that's about it. I don't add subdivisions at all in this phase. So if some parts seem a little too fast, it's just been dynamesh. I think I mentioned before that you're never really done with polishing, and as I was doing the hair, I noticed some areas needed to be corrected, and I was about ready to do it since the general rough stage of the hair is over. Just fixing the brow of him. This is the good thing about when you move on to other parts, is that it gives you a chance to see all these from different perspectives, really, and you have a clearer view of where to fix because you've been doing something else. So I don't mind moving back and forth. I will eventually get back to the hair, as you can see. Again, using Dam Standard to establish those edges, and move Topological to give them some, to stretch them out a little bit more. I am using a custom brush in some parts, but if you want that look, you can just use the Dam Standard. As you can see, the Dam Standard is the same thing. And I'm still using symmetry. It's okay if these parts are the same. Just trying to add some variations to the hair. I don't want it to be a completely flat surface there, or else it's going to look like a helmet, and I doubt that's what you're going for either. So don't be afraid to try some things. See, I'm just pulling some more out, and I'm being very careful with the silhouette. Again, I do not want that little wave to interfere with the ears, so I'm making sure there's a gap between them, so even if you saw the silhouette, I mean, even if it was in the dark, you could see the differences of what's what. Always be mindful of your silhouette. They're just, again, using a damn standard. Getting ready to start making those cuts in the hair. As you can see with his hair, this is exactly why it was important that I took care of the skull, because his hair is so close to it, and how your skull is shaped is how the hair will fall. I mean, you can have characters that are really stylized and maybe their hair is huge to their head and it doesn't fall that quite way, but these are little touches of realism that can really sell your character. And I'm just fixing his hair. He's got plenty of these little tendrils around here. Trying to use them to kind of point towards and away different features of his face. It's still looking very dome-like on top. That's because I haven't quite got what I'm looking for yet. I don't like to add any details to the hair until I have the silhouette where I want it to be, because once you get details in, you start moving things around, it gets a little bit complicated. I'm using or repurposing his eyelashes again, the same one I used, to now make those individual waves. I did tell you that I was going to break symmetry at some point, but to reduce destruction of the actual hair, I'm just making it a separate Z-sphere subtool. I can always merge it later, so I try to keep these things separate. I often use Z-spheres to make parts of the hair, smaller parts. The general mass like to use a Dynamesh sphere, but for the rest, I use Z-spheres, especially if they have long hair. Loving that gizmo. It makes it so easy to do this. This would have been a lot more challenging in 4R7. If you have not upgraded to 4R8 of ZBrush, why not? I'm duplicating that same tendril, and I'm scaling it and adding a few variations so it doesn't look so obvious that I duplicated it. Trying to make the most of that subtool. Again, breaking that symmetry. Adding another tip. And I'll make more variations to it so it again doesn't look like it came from the same piece. These are all ways that you can make your character more interesting by not making it painfully obvious that we got it from the same source or everything is symmetrical and boring. So I keep adding these little variations and keep doing it all over the model. You really get a unique piece. I felt that he needed at least one strand that was kind of going opposite than the others to make it look like, you know, the hair just fell there naturally. Just moving those pieces in a different direction. Want it to complement the side of his head. Now I'm going back to start adding some details around here. Closing that gap there. Not quite done. Still not in love with that silhouette. So again, will all depend on your character. Now I'm using damp sand to start cutting in and add that variation to make it look like those tendrils came from the top of his head. Definitely don't want to have pieces that look like you just plopped them there. So what I typically do is I use the damp standard to start cutting into the hair where I want the different and the individual strands to be. I opted to make that piece just one instead of 2. It looks kind of ridiculous as 2. So I wanted one main focus in the front and one main focus in the back. I definitely know there'll be back shots of this model, so I want to take special care of those pieces there. Still using that damn standard to add those individual chunks to give his hair more variation. When you start adding details like this, it's important to definitely mask the areas you don't want affected. Those areas are going to get smaller and smaller as you go on. That's why the mask with the lasso is so much better. Should also mention that masking is pretty much also dependent on the direction that you're on, so just move it if you're not getting the selection you want. So there I used the clay buildup to build on top of over some of those cracks to give his hair a thick and chunky look. At this point I should also mention that if you notice throughout the entire point with the character, I'm really exaggerating features because A, it's going to make the retopology phase much easier because I have a clear direction of where I need to go. And it also will help because he's most likely going to be textured with a flat shader and all his shadows will be hand painted. It really gives me a clear view of where everything is. So I exaggerate. So when I dynamesh, as you saw, and some of the details were lost, not too much got lost. I dynamesh because I want to clean it up and I don't want any stretching. Sometimes I don't mind the stretching, especially if I'm going to retopologize, but for the hair, I really just don't like it at all. I'd rather just clean it up myself. So there you go. After I dynameshed it, I just gave it a very quick smooth. You notice I don't use the smooth brush often because it just creates more work sometimes. Try to use trim dynamic instead and just fill in areas, but sometimes smooth does help. It gives that overall fuzz that I could just build on top of again. This is that custom brush, but you could use the damp standard on a lower intensity and pinch to get the same effect. Using the move topological to give his hair that wave because it was looking way too straight from the top. Basically, what I'm trying to do is just break that illusion that this was his dome sitting on his head. I want it to look like hair growing out of it. And that's really what you want to accomplish with the hair, that it looks like it was growing out of that head. Where you have, you know, separations on the scalp, like when you comb your hair or part your hair. Just because he's stylized doesn't mean I have to neglect those things. Still moving those pieces. Still thinking it's a little too straight. I have to test them out in different materials just to make sure that it's looking okay.